Hello, welcome to another episode of Namtaro Talks. This episode will be a bit more interesting because it's the first episode recorded after our child has been born. So as you can infer from the title of the episode, it will be about my wife's labor process, the delivery, and the hospital experience as a whole. You already know that I do a talk to text, whether it be writing messages to other people or even jotting down notes, even for episodes like this. I will not really read it verbatim, but most of the ideas were written down. And like I say, sometimes writing down stuff, it helps because I have a lot of ideas and thoughts jumbled up in my head, and it's a bit cathartic to just put them out there in the world in a way that it's a bit more organized. All right, so let's begin. So I will not go into too many details or get too personal, but long story short, my wife was dilating and she was having symptoms. So we went to the ER early during one late evening. However, she wasn't having any major pain or contractions at the time. So, but luckily, they did say to make a hospital bag and leave it near the door and grab it, which I did. However, later would I only come to realize that I was a little unprepared. Luckily, we live within a reasonable distance from the hospital, and I made 2 or 3 trips up back home. Yeah, they only really confirmed that she was dilating once we got to the hospital in the middle of the night. So it just came out like a whirlwind to us. We thought it was the real thing for sure. So we pretty much spent that night at the hospital, her in the hospital bed, me on the couch next to the hospital bed. Yeah, while the hospital staff was monitoring the other symptoms and contractions and dilation. However, there wasn't much more going on throughout the night or throughout the rest of the following day. Not to mention that the symptoms have more or less subsided and are more spaced apart. Yeah, she had little to no pain and was even walking around and trying to do certain movements to not really exacerbate it, but get things going along, you know. And the kid was still on time, still considered full term, but about a few weeks before the due date. So they didn't want to induce anything. So they figured it would be wise to send us home. I mean, we weren't like contacting the news to the whole neighborhood. I just told our parents and immediate family. Her parents live a bit farther away, and they had intended to fly in, but they pretty much accelerated their schedule and decided to fly in that following day. Meanwhile, my parents live nearby, and they drove up that evening once we were discharged home. Yeah, providing food and support. Of course, in the meantime, while we were at the hospital, we were trying to make last-minute plans to see who's going to feed the cat and the rabbit while we're occupied. Yeah, so after my parents left that following, that morning, her parents came in that following evening. However, on the drive to the airport, she was beginning to feel symptoms again. So I was hoping that things played out as smoothly as possible, that the symptoms were manageable. And once we pick up our parents from the airport, I don't know if we would like take them back to our house, drop them off, then head to the hospital, or we would go straight to the hospital ourselves. And of course, these things are out of your control. I mean, when he wants to come, he comes. When the symptoms are there, but there's like the body signal. It's just a matter of what the symptoms are, how strong they are, and how frequent they are. But we made it home, and of course we were both tired and anxious, but we were able to sleep through the night. Her symptoms, they were present for sure, but still manageable. And we went through the next day like regular business. We just ran some errands. Her parents went to Costco and the Asian grocery store and bought some food and cooked for us, and we just hung out at home. Went for a walk in the neighborhood that evening, and I think that was what triggered it. Yeah, around 1 a.m. she told me that her water broke, and I knew it was for real. And at that point, if you don't have a plan, like, good luck to you. I mean, plans aren't always perfect, but you gotta have a relative idea. This time, the bag was better packed. I let her parents know. We head straight to the hospital. We parked. We go through the emergency room. We get a bed situated. The symptoms are picking up. The contractions are picking up. The contractions are more painful, they're more frequent, like 30 to 90 seconds apart. And on a quick tangent, for the time being, I will not be posting any pictures or videos of our kid on YouTube or social media for the time being. Or anyways, of course, there's always the option of the epidural, and we hear good things about it. We hear like side effects and consequences, downsides of it. But the pain, it was a bit much, so my wife opted for it. So the guy who delivers the epidural, honestly, he was like her favorite person in the world at that time. He explained it to her, had her sign some forms, like set things up, clean up her back, gave it to her, and the pain, it subsided to a point where it was much more manageable. So pretty much contractions before, when they came, there's like a little like hill on the I don't know if contractions are an EKG or not, like the wave, electric waveform thing. But now it's just something you see on the screen. Meanwhile, you don't have the pain distracting you as much. Though I heard that if you did not take the epidural, the labor, it's a little faster, but of course more painful. With the epidural, it's slightly slower. And technically my wife was in labor for several days from that first hospital visit based on her dilation. So pretty much the area was a bit stretched for literally at least 2 or 3 days. So at first they had her do a few practice pushes, and you had to time it with the contractions pretty much, and you're just pretty much going by what's on the screen. I mean, I personally can't feel it, but she definitely can. And the nursing staff, they were there, very helpful, very encouraging, telling her when and how to push, which muscles to use, what technique to use, like when to breathe, when to hold your breath. But it is a taxing process for her because the progress, it is minimal, and it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And most of the work, it is for the head, because the head is big and it has to like enter at a right angle, or correct angle. And sometimes when you take a little break, you gotta retract a little bit. Of course, right now she's on the epidural, so her only, like, all she has to do is focus on is the pushing. Like, not to mention that the legs are in not the most comfortable positions on the stirrups. And I will be honest, at that point in the hospital, like, you see everything. You're all in the business. There's little to no boundaries right now. There's modesty, of course. There's still respect and decorum and procedure you still have to follow. But if you are squeamish or self-conscious, you either gotta take a break or you have to get over it. Maybe it should have bothered me, but for some reason it didn't. Maybe it's because I watched the Alien movie, and it's not quite like a xenomorph head, though my cousin, he made a similar reference, but he was talking about a Prometheus movie. And I watched in a lot of Mortal Kombat, but I digress. So once the head is out, the rest of the body, it just comes along pretty much. I was surprised myself. Like, the body, it is like, the time to push it is like a teeny tiny fraction as the effort and time spent on the head. And he comes out crying. He has an umbilical cord, and it's very step by step. Everyone's ready. There's like a team of 4 or 5 people talking and encouraging and having their own roles. The doctor's there, the nurses there, like nursing assistants are there. They allowed me to cut the umbilical cord. Yeah, they clean him off. They pass him to my wife, and then they pass him to me while I'm holding him. But because it was a bit of a rough, to say the least, they had to do some extra things on my wife, and because of that we had to spend an extra day in the hospital to recover, which is for the better. Yeah, for the epidural, yeah, I know I'm jumping back and forth quite a bit, but for the epidural, there is a small time window where you can decide whether you want it or not. But you also take into consideration the time frame that it would last, because if you do it too early, it might wear off too soon. And luckily we did it during the second visit when it was for real. We did it for the first visit, then my wife pretty much had the epidural for no reason. Yeah, I can only speak for my wife. She just told me that it was a huge sense of relief and euphoria once the baby is born. I wouldn't call it traumatic, but it was a taxing and trying experience on her body, and it does take time to recover because there was, of course, blood loss and changes in vitals. So that needs to be addressed accordingly. I don't know much about epidurals, but I just know that they are a godsend for my wife. Yeah, I mean, the thing about being in the hospital is that you have a fair amount of downtime. So I was looking at, when was the first epidural discovered, and when was it like produced for the masses? Yeah, with a quick Google search, it was first discovered around like 1850s and produced for the masses in the 1970s. So, but it makes you realize that for all of humanity before 1850, people just delivered naturally and faced all those contractions, and you pretty much had no choice, pretty much. But overall, the process was as smooth as possible, and the baby had the fortune of both his grandparents on the mom's side and the dad's side coming to visit, even at the same time, believe it or not. Of course, they're all vaccinated, but they take turns looking at him, taking pictures of him, taking pictures with him, holding him. And he was born as relatively healthy. And I keep saying that we count our blessings. Well, not just, of course, in life in general, but especially with the labor and delivery situation in this hospital. Because we see and hear about many different situations where some people may have to stay in the hospital for a week or weeks or even longer. Or if someone's working at the time, like the husband has to go to work, then come back to the hospital, or they live far away from the hospital. They have to do long drives back and forth. Not to mention, we've seen or heard about our share of situations of premature births and the complications that come with that. Even a stillborn or even a death of a twin. I don't mean to be a downer, but it's real, it happens to people. There's many factors and variables that ideally have to line up. Even if they do line up, not everything is completely smooth. You take into account how important the amenities of the hospital facility is, like how clean it is, how well staffed it is, how open it is, how competent and how nice the nurse and the doctors are. Yeah, we got a nurse for each, I think, 8-hour shift, and 2 nurses that stood out was there's some southern gentleman who was pretty sweet, and I feel kind of weird using a word like that for a dude, but he was a sweet dude, he was very warm and comforting and what we needed in that situation. And our last nurse before we were discharged home was this, I'm not sure if it's West Indies or Caribbean, but she's told me she was from Trinidad and Tobago, so it was an accent I don't hear as often, but she was really nice, really knowledgeable, added her own little flair and personality and flavor to our interactions while delivering the information. And to be honest, the food in the hospital, it is what it is. Yeah, we're Asian and they serve American food. Luckily, her parents were nearby, staying at the home, and whatever food they cooked at home, they delivered to the hospital for us to eat. So I ate a bit of both, the food from home and the hospital food. Yeah, we had many things going for us. We had proximity, not to mention the hospitality, affability, professionalism, communication, and knowledgeability of the entire hospital staff. All the doctors, all the nurses, all the lactation consultants. It's like a learning experience. The one thing I had difficulty with was swaddling the baby with the blankets they were given, because the instructions to swaddle, it's with a square blanket, but they gave us a rectangular blanket. So even though I tried to fold it into a square, like things doesn't line up as well. And then you gotta swaddle the right way because you don't want it too tight, but you don't want it too loose where the arms and legs can come out, because they like to be, I don't know, in a contained position, because if the arms and legs move too much, they get a little bit restless. Not to mention, my wife had to make the transition to learn how to breastfeed. And in my job, I'm not just a bystander or a spectator, though I admit many times I still feel like one. I even feel like one right now. But you make sure she's as comfortable as possible, and you carry the baby over to her and away from her and send him back down in the side crib. Not to mention the baby has to learn how to latch. That's also a learning curve, because he has to put his mouth on it, but at the right position and fully on, not just like a teeny tiny bit, but not in a way that's uncomfortable or like yanking at it. Well, we controlled everything we possibly could that was in our control, and had the fortune of things out of our control go as well as possible, because I have situations where people's symptoms and pain are downplayed or they feel disrespected at the hospital, which leads to additional complications and drama, even sometimes like interpersonal clashes at the hospital with the family members and the staff, or in between the family members, like who gets to come, who doesn't, and the logistics. Luckily for both of our parents, we were super clear with communication for logistics, because if that got lost in the mix, that would have been another can of worms. I wouldn't say that we are chill people, but the priority was getting through the experience, making sure the baby's okay, making sure my wife's okay. Not to mention she went through a brief quote-unquote physical therapy, just being able to sit up at the edge of the bed, then stand up, then take a few steps, then make it to the bathroom and back before they would even allow us to be discharged home. And honestly, it is something that is hard to explain, or you can't really watch a video or read a book. I mean, you can get as much information as you can, but only once you go through it yourself, you pretty much learn on the fly. It's something you have to experience for yourself. And it makes me realize how misunderstood or trivialized the entire process is in the media, in TV, and movies, because my wife was in labor and pushing for quite a while. In TV and movies, I mean, you just had the length of the episode, so it's like a couple scenes of pushing and the baby's out. And they assume, oh, the baby's out, everything's perfectly fine. No, the body has to recover. Sometimes there are some aftermath after the baby's out. It's not all hunky-dory, out of the woods. Like in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the joke was when Uncle Phil was announcing that Aunt Vivian was in labor. Will was like, oh my God, Uncle Phil, you ain't got no drawers on. And yes, not having underwear on is kind of funny, but in that situation, like you're all panicked and you're announcing, and it's like go time. It's like if you're at a fire department and the alarm rings and everyone's like sliding down the pole and getting into the truck, but they just had to make it a little bit funny, you know? And after a while, you come to realize how many pregnancy scenes there are in many episodes and movies. A couple that stood out to me was in a Home Improvement where Tim had to deliver Heidi's baby. Cause I don't know why they couldn't make it to the hospital. Well, they did it in a car. And of course, he's Tim, the Toolman Taylor, all macho man with the grunting. Like, arr, 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 arr. So what does he know about delivering a baby, you know? But he managed somehow. Not to mention, there was a flashback episode of Everybody Loves Raymond, where like Deborah was having, I don't know if it was like the girl child or the twins, but Ray and Robert were rushing them to the hospital, but they're in New York area, well, Long Island, and they were in a traffic jam. And Deborah was in labor and had contractions, so Robert tried to deliver the baby. And the humor is in the freaking out and the panicking, you know. But during that whole process, I didn't think it was funny. I just sympathized for my wife. I just hope it went as smooth as possible, that she's okay and the baby's okay. That was the only priorities I had. As of recording this episode, I admit I am not in the best of mood because the quote-unquote big beautiful bill, which is really more like the big BS bill, it has passed. While we were in the hospital, it passed the Senate, then it went back to the House of Representatives, where hopefully it got amended or even killed. But many people turn cold, many people fall in order, and then they passed it, and then the president's going to sign it. And it is an absolutely terrible bill that's going to devastate America. Like, it's pretty much every good thing that we ever had, it's gone. Or every bad thing that we didn't want, it's on. Like, hospitals will close, people are kicked off health insurance, like aid and welfare and financial assistance from the government, mostly gone, mostly defunded. My wife and I, we are fortunate where we don't depend on those things as much, but we are literally one thing away for having to depend on it. That's the hairline thing on everyone in America, pretty much. We are one disaster away from requiring government assistance, pretty much. But now that safety net is like non-existent, or it's very flimsy, very neutered, very inefficient, and they purposely made it that way. They wanted it that way, just for a big tax break, just for $1 trillion or more for the richest people in the country. And it all could have been avoided. They even said it in their Project 2025 that they were going to do all these terrible things. And there is literally no mental gymnastics you can do to justify this bill, unless you are completely delusional, completely uneducated, or completely cruel. And the healthcare system is already stretched very thin and understaffed and complicated with all these insurance nuances. I mean, you can't just kill people in the street, but you understand the sentiment when the CEO of United Healthcare was killed. And it all ties back to our recent situation, because we had a hospital that was within a good proximity. I can't imagine people in rural communities where their only hospital, which may be, I don't know, a tenth the size of ours, and it is shut down. It is not funded anymore. Not just delivering babies with literally any other healthcare need. It's non-existent. It's gone. Like, people will be sick. People will be depressed. People will go crazy. Meanwhile, you look at the rest of the developed world, no other country is doing any of this, you know? They're not shooting themselves in the foot. They're not hurting their own citizens. Like, the model to success, it's already there. Like single payer nationalized healthcare. Like, it's not perfect, but it's better than what we have right now, where services maybe denied, or you risk going into a huge debt just for some medical procedure. Like, what benefit do you have if you cripple the means and necessities to bring life into the world and establish a stable environment in the community and encourage a healthy lifestyle, if you purposely hinder every process and are motivated only based on treating and managing the symptoms? It's like you're playing whack-a-mole, but you have no consistent foundation to begin with of the health and the smoothness of bringing life into the world, but the environment to sustain that life, like the nurture, not just with pregnancy and labor and delivery, but when some things are out of your control, the best thing is try to avoid unnecessary problems in the first place and have the resources there to be guided through those challenging process of things that you are not fully sure of or learn about yet. Meanwhile, as you're being guided through it, then the surrounding support staff, they are communicating the rationale behind it. Like, no one forced anything on us. No one just shoved us to the side. No one kept us out of the dark. We were in the loop. They communicate with us. They explain everything going on. Of course, we have a slight advantage because we had a healthcare background, but it's not like they were trying to sell us something, They weren't pushy. They were objective, which brings me next to my next point. There are many situations and households out there that are much more unstable than what we have right now. I keep saying that we are fortunate and we count our blessings, and I really do mean it, because I have seen my share of others' homes, and I don't want to be one to judge, but I feel for them, They have smaller proximity, limited resources, less organized, much more messier, very cluttered. I mean, you make do with the socioeconomic status that you have and the hand that you are dealt and given. And of course, bringing a child into the world, it is a huge responsibility. People ask, was I excited to have my child? I'll be honest, of course I'm excited, but I am not the type to get super excited about many things. I say that I am very happy, very grateful, but I also try to take pride in being as prepared as possible, in being in as best of a position as possible. Like, I could not imagine having my child when I was still in grad school, when I had a lot of debt to my name, when I didn't even have my own home. Like, you don't know yourself or can't hold your own. How are you going to find the correct partner for you, let alone share in the responsibility of bringing a child into the world and raising them? Though I would like to get into this in a future episode. And the thing about the hospital experience is that everyone there, the staff that is, they are the appropriate cooks, because sometimes you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. You don't want too much back and forth, too much dialogue. Everyone has a different idea, different agenda, different way of doing things. Or the hospital staff, well, we trust them. We had no choice to, but they've been there. They do this literally many times every day. The funny thing is, while my wife was delivering, there was another woman in the clinic who was delivering also at the same time. We joked that there was a competition. At the end of the day, I don't even know who delivered first, and I don't even care. But I've heard of situations where other family members, they try to impose their will. They show up when they're not wanted. They offer opinions that they aren't asked for. I heard of a situation where this woman's mother and mother-in-law, they were very imposing and in her face. So she pretty much just blacklisted them from the hospital and told them they cannot visit her until she's a bit more less stressed, But who knows when that would have been. After giving birth, it's a stressful situation during and after leaving the hospital. And of course, you want those people in your corner, but only if they're constructive and can help you. So in my opinion, during this entire process and afterwards, the mother takes priority. Of course, she gets to be informed about different processes and ideas, but she gets final say and decision about all the major decisions, because at the end of the day, she's the one putting her body and her life at risk, and she's the one who would have to deal with the consequences and the symptoms and the aftermath. I can't imagine someone going up to my wife and saying, "Oh, you have to get the epidural," or "We are withholding the epidural from you." If there was a medical reason to go one way or the other, that I may understand and they explain it clearly. But if they just straight up do that, not just epidurals, but maybe any other procedure, or maybe the C-section, maybe certain medications, maybe certain services, yeah, my wife gets her say, and she should get her resources. But that's what the hospital provided. And I'll be honest, it is an anxious situation. Of course, I was a bit anxious, but my wife was too, and she took priority in that situation. But the hospital is in a decent neighborhood. The town's relatively safe. The amenities are convenient and clean. Good layout, good parking. And with all the crazies going on in the world and the country, we were isolated from it for those few days. Of course, I kept an eye on the news and whatnot. But during that time, like, nothing else mattered. I can't imagine parents having to go through what we went through in turmoil, turbulent situations, whether it be nationally or geopolitically, like having to give birth at a refugee camp or internment camp or on a boat or something, or you're in labor at a hospital, but your hospital might get bombed because like terrorists are hiding in tunnels underneath. Like, it is already a stressful and anxious process. Truthfully, I trust my wife. She seems to hold it together, but I don't take her for granted. I don't downplay her symptoms. Like, if she really, really needs something or something's going on, I try to help her as best as I could. Because at the end of the day, I'm not special. We're not special. But during this entire process, given where we are in life, like the current position that we're in at this current stage in our life, we were able to present our best foot forward and present ourselves through this process. Like, this is where we are. This is what we have. This is how we feel. We'll be okay going through this process. Of course, you're taking financials into account, but it also take into account the social circle and the sense of community, and the people around you who can help, friends, family, and all the available resources we have. And as compared to a sizable amount of the world, we are very fortunate. Well, this concludes this episode, and yeah, you might hear our kid in the background. Well, honestly, I've been pausing this episode to go check up on him every now and then, and now I have to do so again. But once again, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you. Bye.